Hi guys, my name's Christian Murray and I'm the co-publisher of the Queen's Post. Today I'm going to be talking to Jonathan Bailey. He's a candidate for the 26th Council District, covering Long Island City, Sunnyside, Woodside, and parts of Astoria. Hey Jonathan,
Hi.
thanks for joining me today.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh,
It's good to
good
be
mate,
here.
good, likewise. So Jonathan, you got a bit of a name out there, so just tell us why you're running and tell people about yourself who don't know you.
Yeah, well, okay. My name is Jonathan Bailey. I am a candidate for City Council, District 26, Woodside, Sunnyside, Long Island City, Dutch Kills. Um, I'm running because I believe that we need to be building a working class movement that allows us to fight for workers' rights, to fight for to fight for tenants' rights, for renters, against the increasing of housing taxes for owner occupants, um, and to make sure that we are fighting for police accountability and community safety at large. We are in a huge moment of political change right now. And it's really exciting. But also our challenges are huge. And I'm running because for me, when I was early on, when I was looking at this district, at this race, I wanted there to be a candidate in that was dedicated to building the movement that we need in order to tackle the really huge challenges, climate change,
Hmm.
systemic racism, fighting for workers against, the massive expansion of the billionaire class within our world, really. And to take on those challenges, we're going to need a movement. And so I thought,
Okay.
okay, I think this makes sense for me to jump into this race.
Good. So Jonathan, just tell us about your involvement in this district and how long you've been here, either working or living. Just sort of give us a bit of background as to your affiliation here.
Yeah. So probably some of the things that people like might know me most from are I'm one of the co-founders of Amazonians United, New York City, um, which started here. We started here in West Queens.
Hmm.
I work at the first Amazon warehouse here in Queens.
Hmm.
Um, and helped found it to ensure that we're fighting for workers' rights when Jeff Bezos was stealing from us as workers, which I know sounds incredible to people, but yes, yeah, billionaires still steal from their employees. We founded Amazonians United to fight for our rights, to fight back, to make sure that we are getting what we have been promised. I've been very involved with a lot of different activist projects, including fighting against gentrification. I've been involved with I've served as one of the executive committee members of Justice for All Coalition, which is a project that fights for those who live in public housing to ensure people are getting their Section 9 rights,
Hmm.
mostly here in West Queens, in Woodside houses, um, in Queensbridge, and in Ravenswood and Astoria houses, but as well as helping out other fights in public housing across the city. I'm an ex-co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America,
Hmm.
the socialist organization that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Zoran Diani are members of, as well as actually others holding office currently.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't want to just like be a list of
No,
that
no.
feels like I'm a resume, but yeah, those are the things and the fights I've been involved
All
with.
right.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Oh,
Terrific.
also I've been in district for the past 8 years.
Right. Okay. No,
Yeah, sorry, I
you're
knew that was in there. I want to make sure it was in.
and you're in Woodside. Am I correct? Yeah.
Yep.
All right, Jonathan. Listen, just tell us a little bit about your occupation. You know, you work at Amazon. Tell us a little bit about that, and tell us, about some of your struggles there.
Yeah. Yeah, I work in Amazon logistics. As many people are aware, Amazon has really fiercely expanded into the logistics sector. And has huge amounts of influence, not just through the Amazon logistics, but also through.
Excuse me, Jonathan. What is Amazon Logistics? Excuse me for asking.
Yeah, I'm sorry. As well as I was gonna say, as well as UPS, USPS, FedEx, all of these logistics operations that make sure that your goods arrive to your door.
Okay.
Amazon has really been expanding into that sector, and
Okay.
so I work within that area within Amazon. The area where uh, the area that is known for workers ending up peeing in bottles. I mean, that is what is all over the news right now.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, in that area of Amazon.
Right. Okay. So you're basically making sure that parcels and stuff go to the right places in New York City, and you're sort of like the
Absolutely.
go-between center. Okay, I gotcha. All right. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Amazon as in the HQ2 campus that was proposed a couple of years ago. I'm sure you got some thoughts
Fantastic.
on, I'm sure you got some thoughts on that.
I
What
do.
going back to, turning the clock back just over 2 years, how do you see that? I mean, what did you think of it at the time? And, how do you think it would have gone down?
Um, Sorry,
What
what do
did
you
you
mean?
what did you think of the deal when it was proposed? Were you an advocate for it? And do you think, this neighborhood has kind of missed out on an opportunity or dodged a bullet?
Yeah, so a lot of folks still don't really get what that fight was about. There's a lot of confusion over that fight, how it really came to Western Queens, what it was going to mean for Western Queens, who are the different parties and interests that were really involved with that fight. So I think it's best to start off at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the fight against Amazon HQ2, the fight for it. All of it was really about real estate money. Um, when real estate developers, really have real estate development money has really dominated New York City politics.
Mm-hmm.
And when all of our elected officials wrote to Jeff Bezos, our current city council member personally,
Mm-hmm.
that was like a giant pull to bring in this gentrification engine into Western Queens,
Mm-hmm.
so that the real estate developers who donate so significantly to all of our politicians could actually kind of capitalize on that investment in trying to own New York City politics. So like that's what actually brought Amazon HQ2 here. Next piece that we have to discuss is, why is it such a gentrification engine? Well, on average, Amazon employee developers, spend a year at Amazon's headquarters, 1 year, right? And they come in from all over, right? So the whole point of this was, real estate developers have all of these empty skyscrapers in Long Island City. They need to reap, on their investment. They need to try to generate as large of a profit as possible. And so the solution was to bring in an Amazon HQ2, which will bring in all of these young tech workers making six figures from all over the world, who will
Mm-hmm.
stay there for 1 year, who are willing to pay $3,500 a month in rent, and then after a year, spit them out into other tech sectors. Amazon HQ2 was supposed to be a gentrification engine for Western Queens. That is really what the struggle is about. There's a lot of conversation about the $3 billion that they would have been extracting of our money as taxpayers. But that's not totally what the fight was about. So for me, I'm against big businesses taking billions of dollars from us. Jeff Bezos doesn't need any more of our money. But also I'm against, the creation of gentrification engines that'll push, will push thousands of families out of our district. So for me, that's how I saw the fight. Really, that's the kind of lens that I understood the fight.
Okay. I mean, how do you keep a balance though between bringing in businesses that can provide jobs, but at the same time, allay your fears of gentrification? How do you balance that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was hoping you would ask me.
Oh, right, okay.
So first of all, recognizing this as a housing issue, we have to sort out, okay, so what are we going to do to ensure that that people aren't being pushed out of their homes, right? That people aren't being displaced. That we're not creating even more intense incentives to defund public housing, to let it go into disrepair so we can just privatize it, right? We have to make sure that we're looking at every area within housing, whether it be renters, the 76% of our district that are renters, whether it be owner occupants, which make up most of the rest of folks living in district, but as well as public housing, right? Those are kind of the real, the three pieces of working class housing in our district. And so we got to make sure that we have strong controls around rent. For me, because of the Erstat law, that has been taken out of our hands as city council. But we could implement things like an anti-warehousing tax, right? So one of the strategies that real estate developers use right now is, being perfectly happy with empty homes, because it ensures that the amount of rent that can be charged for those who are housed is higher, right? So that's why we have 3 empty apartments in New York City for every person that is without a home and living on the streets in New York City, right? So we could implement an anti-warehousing tax, tax those empty apartments at a higher percentage. That way we create an incentive to decrease the cost of rent. And that would affect all of us, right? It would affect both those who are currently houseless, but it would also affect all of us who are renting, the 76%.
Would you do that for commercial businesses like retail stores as well?
Oh, you getting ahead, baby.
All right, all right.
No, I love it. I love it. Right. We'll get there. We'll get there. Right. But then also ensuring that we end systems of value capture is what it's technically called, where we're putting in projects that inflate the value of certain properties. That way we can try to extract more rent or more housing taxes out of owner occupants, right? So owner occupants end up getting the effects of gentrification as well. They're just tied to their properties. And then finally, public housing. We need to make sure that we are protecting public housing. We need to make sure that we are ensuring Section 9 rights. Currently, NYCHA has ousted the Queensridge Resident Council. That should be that's a clear violation of thousands of people's Section 9 rights.
Help me out, mate. What are Section 9 rights? Excuse me.
Yeah. So Section 9 rights are, the rights of public housing. So a lot of people don't recognize this, so we have the most fantastic system of public housing in New York City. Sorry, my wife texted me saying that I need to take off my glasses so that people can see me. Yeah. One of the things that working class folks were able to accomplish through the early 1900s was the creation of public housing, and with that, Section 9 rights, which include things like democratic control of neighborhoods. It's one of the coolest things that we have accomplished as working class people in U.S. history, in my opinion. And resident councils, resident council presidents, that power is concentrated within them. Over the years, though, a lot of those powers have been eroded. You don't hear about resident councils anymore. You just hear about tenants unions, right? You don't, like, most people don't recognize that resident council presidents, that is a federally elected office, like Congress. It's a federal district. Okay. It's designated under Section 9 rights. So when NYCHA steps in and just ousts the resident council of the largest public housing development in the Western Hemisphere, that is a really, really big issue. But because our understanding of these rights have been eroded over decades, people aren't freaking out. People aren't saying, oh my gosh, this is an assault on us as working class folks. Most people are just like, oh, government's doing something, like it's not good, but like whatever, we don't realize it as like a crisis of working class power. So I'm sorry that that's such a long-winded answer, but basically when it comes to housing, yeah. A lot of people don't know, and frankly, a lot of this isn't being covered.
Well, yeah, I can see why.
There's a lot of confusion. And frankly, the pandemic has hit those in public housing more fiercely than it has affected us at large. And so you have these communities that are losing family members, friends. There's like, it's actually introducing chaos, right? And then in that setting, that's the setting that NYCHA decides, oh, we're going to take away these rights, these powers that people deserve. It's something that you'll see often happens when people are thrown into chaos. They're often taken advantage of in their most vulnerable moments. And so for me, looking at that, I'm like, okay, that's definitely one of the lines that we have to be really fighting on. So to get back to the real question of like, how do we allow development without displacement? Well, we make sure that we're fighting for renters. We make sure that we have things like an anti-warehousing tax. We fight for owner occupants. We make sure that we're not creating these like systems of value capture that are going to end up being particularly challenging for them, and make sure that they're not having increases of taxes just because we are developing economically, right? And then we got to make sure that those in public housing, that they are receiving their rights, that they can feel them, that in their everyday lives, that it's not an obscure thing that exists completely outside of people, but they're aware that they're aware and living through those rights, right? We got to make sure that public housing is also properly funded, so that there's not that incentive to get rid of it and privatize it. So that's, if we nail those things, then we can look at economic development in a very different way, because we recognize it's not going to end up pushing out everybody who lives in our community.
So if all of those things were in place, Jonathan, and Amazon came in, would you say, all right, well, these things are in place now, we can go ahead with it?
Well, so like those things are super important to make sure that housing is good. There are other pieces I think that we need to nail. For instance, we don't really have the level of working class power right now, like necessary. I mean, this as a result of kind of an erosion of working class power over decades, we don't really have a sense in our communities that we can just come together and fight together to ensure each other's rights, to ensure that we are treated with dignity. That's not really a part of our culture right now, in the way that it needs to be in order to take on, I think, a challenge like Amazon HQ2. If there's enough of us who are on board and coordinated, then I think, then in those circumstances, we have the capacity to take on those challenges. But better than that, like, we can make sure that we are creating spaces for workers' cooperatives, for small businesses to be able to take root and develop in our community. We can make sure that we're investing in the people that live here. That is an option. And I think that that's something that we should be looking to invest in.
Okay. All right, Jonathan. Well, listen, there was a development on Barnard Avenue that was moving forward. Do you see that as an investment in the neighborhood, or do you see it as an intrusion on, people in Sunnyside? And do you think it should have, or do you think it should be moving forward?
So, I that it was like a super contested, like everybody's been talking about Phipps housing, and it's been extremely contested. I agree that that is not the direction that I mean, first and foremost, when it comes to housing for working class people, public housing was and has always been a great idea. The idea that we are ensuring, like, that we are moving towards housing as a right, like we're actually introducing things that enable us to ensure housing as a right. That's really the direction that we should be going. So I'm more enthusiastic about investments in public housing, instead of like finding new ways in which those who are trying to profit off of housing investments. I mean, I think that the conversation is always going to be around how do we treat those who are investing in housing as an investment. That's going to be the conversation. Because
Jonathan, so if you were sitting in the city council a couple of weeks ago, this thing went up before the council, would you say?
Oh, I'd vote no.
No,
sorry, nay. Yeah, I'd vote nay. I agreed with the there was a, I think, pretty sharp analysis put forward by Emily Sharp, which is another city council candidate, on that, actually specifying like, hey, folks who are making minimum wage, this is actually not affordable. I like agree with her analysis. Me and my coworkers at Amazon would have, like, we'd still have the same challenges that like it's a sharp analysis. I encourage folks to go and read it. But yeah, I would not have voted in favor of the development.
All right. Now, Jonathan, looking at the space where Amazon was going to go, or where discussions were that it would go, well, there's a lot of land there now that's sort of not being used in any great way. What would you like to see there? What would you think if someone put forward a zoning application for a series of towers, half residential, half commercial?
Well, so again, some of that includes like public land.
Yeah, that's right.
I've mentioned, I think that public land is great. I think that we should actually be expanding our uses of public land, and expanding the ways in which the community can engage in decision making over that land, right? Right now, again, the conversation is continually being driven by real estate developers, right? Like, somehow we just ended up talking about, hey, how can we move these like public assets into the hands of like private real estate developers in a way that's okay? And to me, it's not our responsibility as the public to ensure the profits of real estate developers. That should not be the conversation. The conversation should be, how can we enrich the lives of working class people, increase their participation, like their like actual exercise of democracy in their everyday life, through these public assets, through public lands. And to me, that looks like us, like, first of all, deciding in a way that actually gets feedback from the community what we want, but also, we can develop spaces that allow for workers cooperatives to develop as businesses. For small businesses, we can actually use that space to create environments that allow us to develop what we want to see in the community, as opposed to just, looking for gentrification engines like in Amazon headquarters.
I mean, the city through the EDC put out that RFP. I mean, they could have just said, the city could have said, listen, we'll turn it into a park with trees and then develop, all around it with flexible property, etc. But just taking the private land for a second, what would you be okay with some towers and some residential apartments and some space for small businesses and things? What would your take be on that?
Well, when it comes to building some more towers, again, like the issue isn't, like, our main issue isn't a lack of housing. Our housing crisis doesn't come from a lack of housing. If that were the case, we wouldn't have the issue of all of these empty apartments, and homelessness, right? Like, the issue isn't having enough housing. And frankly, I think that if we were to introduce an anti-warehousing tax that decreases, that would actually put pressure on large landholders, on large landowners, in such a way that it decreases the cost of rent. I think that probably a lot of them would decide, hey, maybe now's not the time for us to be trying to build all of these skyscrapers that will sit empty until we find a new gentrification engine, right? The actual conflict is around, hey, how do we create a gentrification engine, right? That's what they're fighting for. How do we create these investments that we can then ensure large profits from? And for us as working class people who don't want to be pushed out of our neighborhoods, our fight is, no, let's stop investing and creating all of these incentives to gentrify us out of our neighborhoods. So I think that there's things that we could do that would probably make it so that they don't really want to. I'm not, I do, there's some folks who argue that we need to be downzoning areas. Like, for me, again, the real fight is about ensuring that we aren't displacing working class people in our community, and that we are developing power within our community to fight against folks who are pushing to just use land as an investment and extract as much profit as possible, even at our expense.
Okay, no, fair enough. Moving on, Jonathan, looking at police and budgets. I'm sure you've got some thoughts on that. Can you tell us what they are? Would you cut the budget? What would you be looking to do?
Okay. First, I think that we need to address something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Y'all wrote an article, huh?
Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah. We got to address something.
Go ahead.
Y'all wrote an article about me canvassing one of our city council members, and y'all took his side of the story and did not consult me at all. And so I would like to just let the air be cleared. I knocked on Councilman Daniel Drom's door, first lightly with my knuckles, and then when I didn't hear,
so people can get an idea what we're talking about here. Let's give them a backstory, okay? All right, so what happened was people were discussing the budget. There was discussion about the $6 billion budget, and I think, I might be mistaken, Danny Drum said, let's pull it back $1 billion or something, right? Now you and you and many others sort of said, hey, listen, that's not enough. We should pare it back more. I might be wrong on that, but is that kind of, it's been a while, but is that kind of where the discussion was?
Kinda.
Okay,
so
tell me exactly.
Yeah. So
we want to give people a background. We want to give people a background.
Yeah, I know. And it's like super insider, right? Like if you're not engaged in the fight, it can be so confusing. You're right. Thank you for like, good to get into the context.
Yeah.
So
Last year.
this past summer,
Yeah.
during the budget negotiations, there were demands across the US for us to move out of our investments in policing and move towards investments in transformative justice. For New York City Council, that included a demand to divest from policing. In that, our city council and the mayor, they tried to do some fun accounting budget line tricks to appear as if they were making some kind of substantial change within our budget. But none of that was real. And I mean, even before that, like, we knew that as activists, we knew that we had to push if we wanted to see any change. And for us, that included we've canvassed our city council members many times before, and for us, one of the activities was going to Councilman Daniel Drum's door. He was no longer working out of his office, and so since we've knocked on his door many times before, we decided, okay, we're going to go to the finance chair's residence and canvass how we have before. I knocked on his door lightly. I thought that he probably didn't hear my knock, and so I tapped with my pen to make sure that it was, has that higher pitch and it kind of echoes through the house. Okay. When he didn't answer, I left right afterwards. But y'all decided to talk to him and hear his side of that story, and it turned into, angry black guy pounds on the door of a city official, and like even included some politicians accusing me of having committed a crime. And I had calls from folks who said that private conversations were going on for how that could be seen as criminal, which was a very scary time for me. And I was a little frustrated that you only took one side of that story, especially with like other like Black liberation activists having police come and tear them out of their homes. It was a little scary for me, I'll say.
Well, yeah, I can't remember exactly how it went down. I mean, we wouldn't have known, who was there. I can't remember exactly. Did we say it was you? We did?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm sure
you
back.
Got it. No, it's okay. I'm not like, I don't want to be angry about it.
No. You know what? My problem is I don't have a full recollection of it. I know. I think it all started because we saw Danny Drum tweeted about it, and I think he sent a tweet, and it was like he sent it to, if I recall, he sent it to say AOC and said, "Oh, listen, hey, call your people to ease up or something." But I can't remember exactly, but I think that was what prompted it all, and I don't even remember exactly, how it all went down. But
I remember.
I do know that we definitely would have. It all started from seeing his tweet, and then I know our reporter called him, and I think our reporter reached out to the DSA. I don't know if they could reach it, if they were able to get hold of you. I'm not sure exactly how it went down, but it's been a while. But I mean, we certainly wouldn't have like just thought, all right, we're going to go with his view and that's it, because I mean, why would we? But anyway.
I mean,
listen, I'm sorry if we caused you any distress. I mean, that's not what we would ever want. I mean, it's, obviously it's our job to try and tell the story to the best of our ability. And if we kind of let you down there, I'm sorry that's sort of the way it went. And, again, we don't want to cause anyone any strife. We try and tell it the best we can with who we can reach, etc. But, we obviously don't have a dog in the fight. We just want to tell the story and move forward. But
I
So
understand.
I so yeah, we apologize if you know you were affected by that in any way, if it sort of hurt you in any way, because that's not the purpose of doing anything like this. Mm.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you saying that, and it's challenging also because when folks, when like certain folks have like tons of power, it's really easy to get the story out that you want to be the story that when you want to shape the conversation, it's generally easy to do that. And when you don't really have much power, it's really hard to do that. And so I've it's not like the first time that this has happened to an activist. It's just like, I just wanted to mention my discontent.
No, no,
And
fair enough. Yeah,
that,
fair enough, mate. And you know what? If we'd reached you and we hadn't reached him, I guess it could have been a whole different ball game. But I think that's kind of where it went. Who did we speak to? Who were we able to get hold of? Obviously there was something going on, and we went with that. And again, if it didn't reflect really what happened, we should do better next time. And I guess that's really where it's at. But there was no sort of
I appreciate it.
no thought of
I
shaping
appreciate
anything.
you saying
Again,
it.
we don't win or lose from any of that. We just want to get it right. Yeah. So look, so just getting back to the conversation, Jonathan.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on on the police budget? Obviously, you were involved in it. So how would you like to see it if you were council member? What would you look to do?
So for me, there's a lot of conversation around defunding the police, and what is interesting is that the conversation from there just moves to like different dollar amounts, right? And you'll see city council members advocate for like different amounts all over the place, and like that's like almost kind of like, it's like almost like we're relating to that as if that's an indication of like, oh, how radical like folks are.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of derails the conversation, because the conversation is about moving from a carceral based society to one that focuses on transformative and restorative justice.
Mm-hmm.
So, right now, if, somebody is like using drugs in order to self-medicate due to mental illness, um, what happens is, we like slap a carceral approach on that. We throw them in jail. That's how we deal with that issue. When kids are acting up in school, we suspend, expel, right? Like this idea of carceral methods infects all of our approaches, right? In everything that we do, right? And what we're trying to do is move away from carceral approaches to all of our problems to ones where we're preventing crimes of subsistence, crimes of poverty by tackling issues of poverty, where we are actually changing our approaches to community safety at large in general, instead of sending police to every disagreement that happens within our community. We create systems like Denver Stars, like the Denver Star program, where instead of police being sent out for every 911 call, sometimes a social worker paired with an EMT respond to certain calls. If we did that, we could prevent a lot of pain and suffering in our community. And so for me, it's about actually making a full transition from carceral based approaches in our society to ones of restorative and transformative justice. For me, I think that it was a huge mistake of the previous city council to increase the police budget, to put more, I think it was 1,300 police officers out on the streets. I mean, that's what they decided to do when we were out in the streets protesting against police violence during the first wave of the Black Lives Matter movement, right, in 2015. When we were out there because Daniel Pantaleo was getting away with murdering that was that was a huge issue, and a lot of people felt that like deeply enough that we started applying pressure, right? We got out in the streets. We were going hard, and the hope was that people would join in, and that we were going to create some changes to our city and set an example for the United States on what police accountability could look like, or how we could start moving in a new direction, right? But instead, the city council decided that they were going to increase the police budget, that they were going to put more cops on the street, so that there could be more cops to be like beating me and my friends who are out in the streets protesting police violence.
Jonathan, what did you make? I mean, a lot of the council members that were like, holier than thou, saying we've got to, cut the budget to smithereens, we're out there voting for increasing in 2015. I mean, what did you make of that? I mean, you must have thought, where were they in 2015 when it
massive. Thank you. Actually, you're the first person who I've spoken to who has brought that up. It was a massive eye roll for like half of us, right?
Yeah.
Everybody in their private groups are like rolling their eyes. They're like, okay, this city council member literally ran on an increase of broken windows policing. That's the stuff that gave us stop and frisk. Like all of that. We have council members who ran on that stuff suddenly being the heroes of transformative justice. And like, we're all happy that people voted in a different way than maybe they voted back in 2015. But let's not delude ourselves. There are people who are fighting for change, and there's people who aren't fighting for change. And we need to be fighting for change. We need to be empowering folks who are fighting for change. Otherwise we get more of the same that we have going on right now. So for me, it was a massive eye roll for me. I'm happy that people changed the way that they were voting, but it's like, okay. For me, I'm like, okay, what we need is people who are dedicated to moving away from carceral-based systems to transformative justice-based systems. If we didn't increase the police budget then, we would have had a smaller police budget now, and it would have been less challenging to decrease the police budget further so that we could invest in other in other systems, in transformative justice-based systems, stuff like the Denver Star program. But because we've been moving so hard in the direction of police dominance of society, because of that, we have things like Boston Dynamics, like robot Terminator dog out on the streets. It's crazy. It is crazy.
I should laugh, but it just sounds funny.
Yeah, you should laugh. It is hilarious. It's comical. It's like it's comic book villainry. Like the idea that we have moved so far in that direction, that we're okay with spending tens of thousands of dollars on that instead of investing in preventing homelessness, which can actually decrease crimes of subsistence. It's insane. The expression of our values is just so out of line.
Just and to so finish for me, on that, Jonathan, though, okay, in a couple of sentences or paragraphs, what would you do? It's 2022. You're sitting in the council in June of next year. What would you do if the budget came along? Just tell us briefly what your approach would be.
Yeah, well, so a lot of this also has to do with how much of our community we have invested in moving away from carceral-based systems and into transformative just-based systems. If there's a lot of people who are tuning in, who are engaging, we can do a lot really fast. It's going to be hard, but we can do a lot really fast. I think that we need to go in and cut all the fat, right? Cut all of the investments in, like, robot Terminator dogs for the NYPD. We need to cut all that, right? And like there's a lot of that type of stuff. Like people don't know about things like the memorandum that was drafted with the Filipino National Police so that the NYPD could put an office in the Philippines. Like people don't like, there's crazy stuff that people don't know about and are like, what? When they hear about it, they're like, we're spending our money on that. So we can cut a lot of that stuff real quick, right? Mm-hmm. And then we can go in and see, okay, where are we using police to address certain issues in society that we can like just shift to different types of programs immediately, right? So for me, that looks like the creation of something that replicates Denver, Colorado's STAR program, mm-hmm. Where we actually have a different set of folks who are responding to 911 calls to ensure that we're not escalating violence in our communities. And so I think it's hard to like say like a number of like what exactly we could do on year one. Mm-hmm. But I think that if we're like first trimming fat and then changing to new systems of community safety, I hope that we could move $3 billion away from our investments in a carceral-based society as quickly as possible.
Okay, fair enough. Moving on, Jonathan, to community boards. What are your thoughts on community boards, and how would you select board members if you were to be the next council member?
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to how we go through making decisions mm-hmm. over what we're doing with our shared spaces in our community, people who are closest to the pain, I believe, need to be closest to the power. They experience these issues differently. Mm. When somebody with somebody who's like who is at risk of being displaced is in a position of power and is able to to take part in the decision making, they're going to make different decisions than somebody who will benefit from displacement. So for me, I would focus on trying to find okay, who's invested in making sure that we are supporting our community, who are in those positions just because of who they are. Now, I think that like there's definitely a lot of different interests that we have to make sure are represented, right? The challenges that we have in our society and how much change we need to make, how quickly, it has to be informed by as many folks as possible. Otherwise, what we'll have is just infighting. And we can see there's lots of opportunity for infighting as it is. But I would focus on
and there's no shortage of it. So, so taking your sort of philosophy, then how would you sort of execute that then?
So I think that we need to have folks represented. So first of all, our biggest issue is housing. We're in a housing crisis. There's 1 million New Yorkers who are right now slated to go to housing court to be evicted. That's it's a crisis like we just I've never seen in my lifetime, and I think none of us have seen in our lifetime. It's the largest housing crisis that we've experienced. Greater than during the Great Recession. So for me, first, making sure that a lot of people whose interests are aligned with renters, with owner occupants, with public housing are represented significantly there. We got to make sure that folks who are invested in creating workers' cooperatives and supporting small businesses are represented there. There's a lot of also other challenges. Like we need to actually move our city into the 21st century. Like there's issues around just information and what is accessible and what can be easily understood. I think that we need to make sure that folks like that are represented. I think that we need to make sure that we have different folks who are involved with labor organizing and involved with labor organizations so that we can increase our support for workers. There's a lot of things that we can do to make sure that there's the right representation on that board. But again, unfortunately, community boards don't really hold a ton of power. Like the most significant thing is in relationship to the Euler process, how we decide what buildings go up or not. And ultimately, city council decides that. So I think that we also have to talk about, like, what do we want community boards to be? How do we actually want to go about democratizing power into the hands of people? And really, before we figure that out, talking about the makeup of the community board just doesn't have nearly as much weight.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Talking about ULIP, Jonathan, what do you think of member deference? And that's talking about city council, of course, and the local official basically having the say on what goes forward. What do you think of that? Would you advocate for that, or would you say, hey, wait a minute, 51 heads should be focusing on this?
Yeah. So when it comes to member deference, if there's another city council member that says, you know what, displacement from my community is what I'm going for. I mean, if that's the approach that they take, I'm going to vote against them.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that, like, we need more city council members who are willing to say, no, we're going to fight displacement in our communities and communities across New York. That's the type of folks that we need to have in city council. And if I'm elected to city council, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight for everybody, those in our community and those working class folks outside of our community as well.
Yeah. Okay. I remember. I mean, this came to a head with the Flushing Creek development, particularly of late. Anyway. Yeah. Okay.
There are a lot of there were a lot of activists out there who are all a part of the same circles. We had DSA had like a lot of members out there, for instance. And it's a bummer how it turned out, but we're gonna keep fighting for against displacement. We're gonna keep fighting for renters and everything. So
no, good. Okay, Jonathan, last topic, transportation. What do you think, or how could the transportation network be improved in Western Queens? And along those lines, are you also an advocate for expanding the protected bicycle lane network to move New Yorkers around?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about I'm excited that there has been a lot of talk and also, an increased amount of federal funding towards MTA. I think it's important for folks to understand that most of the funding comes from the federal government and from the state, and that's great. If we want to really take on other huge transportation projects, it's going to take it's going to take more of that funding. It's not something that we can just do at the city level, or it would just be extremely challenging, and we would have to make that like a real dedicated focus if we're going to massively expand like our train systems. But fortunately, in our district, we have a significant amount of trains running through our district. And so I think that the big topic of contention is the bike lanes. When it does come to trains, we got to make sure that we are prepared for climate change, for the oncoming climate catastrophe. I mean, I don't think that, in my opinion, looking at the way that we are currently moving, there are just so many, there's just a lot that we're not going to be able to avoid. It's we're going to see sea levels rising. There's not, we're fighting as hard as we can, I'll tell you. Activists are pushing real hard, but I think that we need to be prepared for our lack of success in that area. And so make sure that our trains are resilient and prepared for oncoming climate catastrophe. As far as bike lanes go, which is a much smaller issue, but somehow much more hotly contested, there's a few narratives that end up going missing, right? First of all, bike lanes are not they're not a hipster issue. They're a working class issue for the tens of thousands of bike couriers that work in New York City. It's a labor issue. It's about their safety. It's about getting, as New Yorkers continue to order things from Seamless and Grubhub and Uber Eats, expecting folks to come to their door bringing them all the fantastic things that our world has to offer. Like there's infrastructure that makes that possible, and bike lanes are a really key part of that. It's about bike courier safety. It's about them being able to complete their work, right? So there's all of that. I'm a firm supporter of protected bike lanes because like not just the issue of climate change, but also it's just an issue for our working class folks here in our district. But one of the things that ends up being missing when people do acknowledge that is that we build bike lanes in gentrified areas. We've decided that, okay, bike lanes are okay to put in if, working class folks are bringing you your whatever, right? Like we've enabled that, right? We've actually encouraged that class structure even in the way that we've built in our city. If we believe that bike lanes are something that we should have for safety of working class folks in New York, we should be building protected bike lanes everywhere, not just in gentrified areas. So yeah, I'm a firm supporter of bike lanes. I'm not I don't hate people who drive cars at all. But we need an expansion of bike lanes. It needs to be a part of our common infrastructure.
Okay, terrific. All right, Jonathan, on that note, I'd like to say thank you. And I'm really glad you brought to my attention, what happened last year. And again, I just wanted to let you know that I apologize for any distress that we may have caused you, because that was never our intention.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you acknowledging it, really.